Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. My name is Nick Rago. I'm the field CTO, and I'm part of the product team here at Salt Security. For those that aren't familiar with Salt Security, ultimately, we want you to be able to embrace our new API-first application world with minimal risk. And our unique strategy and intelligence platform, well, it helps organizations do just that. The unique challenges we've seen related to API risk requires that API security be a team sport and that each player be connected and become more API aware. This is why we recently announced our new SALT Technical Ecosystem Partner Program, or as we call it, the STEP Partner Program. The program includes API-focused technology partners from various security disciplines throughout an API's lifecycle. These partners are leveraging API intelligence from the SALT platform to further enhance the value they already provide related to API security. So I wanted to have a discussion today about the role of application security testing when it comes to API security and where it fits in a good overall API security program. I'm joined with a shining and an emerging star in the application security testing space and a partner in the SALT STEP program, Bright Security. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Gadi Bashvitz, who is the CEO of Bright Security. So Gadi, just wanted to know if you just say a quick hello, maybe a second or a couple minutes about yourself and something fun about yourself.
As Nick said, I am one of the co-founders and the CEO of Bright Security. We've been running Bright for about 5 years now, focused on developer-centric enterprise DAST, which covers both applications and APIs. Very excited about the partnership with Nick. Something fun about me. I've been doing cybersecurity for 30 years now. It's kind of scary to say it. I started in the Israeli intelligence unit and have jumped through a lot of different roles and positions since then. I've been living in the US for the last 20 and a bit years, first in New York, and have been in the Bay Area for the last 15-ish.
Right. So you are the smart side of this conversation. I wanted to talk about dynamic application security testing and the space that you're in. So the interesting thing for me is that DAST has been around for a while. You know, if I asked, Chat GPT, it's going to
for the longest time.
Yeah.
I feel like Billy Joel here.
Yeah. It comes back to the horse and carriage days. No, but I think it actually comes back to like the 1990s or whatever. The .com boom is when it starts to put its stamp on there. I know you weren't looking to sort of repave old roads rather than, make new roads. And anyway, so I'm just kind of curious what you saw from your mindset that you needed to jump into space and really innovate and fix it.
It's an interesting story. It's a good pivot story because when we actually started Bright 5 years ago, just us, the four founders, we did not set out to build a new or modern DAST solution. We started with something that is much more pertinent today, and that was an AI-driven fuzzer that was intended to identify 0 days and find vulnerabilities that nobody knew about in new environments. And we did that for a couple of years, and it was too successful. We actually were able to crash any environment we ran on, and we were too harmful with our solution. And as we were doing that, and we talked to a lot of organizations, a lot of financial institutions, government institutions, cybersecurity companies, they all said, this is great that you're able to do this. Thank you for the pain you're inflicting on us. However, this is not our main problem. Our main problem is that we have had these AppSec solutions that we've been deploying for the last 20, 25 years, and they just don't work anymore in our environment. Especially if we look at DAST solution. We know that all of these low-hanging vulnerabilities are out there, whether they're in our APIs or whether they're in our applications. However, the problem is that by the time we find them, it's too late. Because we've shifted our development practices into DevOps practices or agile development or whatever you want to call them, by the time we ran the AppSec scans, it was too late and everything made it into production. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a solution that enabled us to run these scans much, much earlier in the development lifecycle and shift the ownership for those scans to the developers and not have the AppSec team, which is very, very limited in its capacity, be able to run these scans. That's where we said, you know what? We can actually take all the know-how that we've built in the last couple of years and shift that into a modern DAST solution and go in and help all these organizations that have changed their development practices to find these vulnerabilities early and remediate them far before they actually made it into production. You need to make sure that that experience is completely seamless for the developers themselves by, one, doing the discovery offline. Two, you need to give them the tools to effectively retest, effectively validate the vulnerabilities that they are remediating. Three, you need to make sure that you're giving them proof of vulnerability and you're giving them remediation guidelines, because they're not AppSec experts. If you just tell a developer, hey, this is an XSS, they don't know what to do with it in most cases. Right? But if you tell them, this is an XSS, here's how it's manifesting in your organization or in your code, and here are things you can do to fix it, and now go ahead and retest it after you fixed it very, very easily, they become part of the process. Last but not least is showing developers, and you start with development management, but then you trickle down to the developers themselves. You show them the ROI, and you show them that, A, we are not just going to give you noise. It's not going to be that static solution that is showing you 80 vulnerabilities until you go to figure it out, right? It will, out of those 80, it will identify the 5 that are true vulnerabilities. And as part of the reports in our solution, we can show those ROI charts that show the developers how much more effective they were because they found these vulnerabilities early and they fixed them early.
Wanted to shift a little bit and talk more about API testing more specifically. So we saw this evolution as organizations started to move to API first and embrace APIs and really change the way we build applications and the speed and we innovate. A lot of organizations quickly realized that, hey, all of the incumbent defenses and technologies that I have in place aren't really doing the job. So, we came into existence because organizations were quickly finding out there's a low barrier to breach. What do you mean? I have all these gates and and obstacles that are supposed to be getting in an adversary's way, and all they had to do is change one parameter, and now they're an adversary's getting somebody else's data, for example. So I'm just curious on the testing side, what that evolution has looked like. What is different about testing APIs? What do you need to test APIs? And I guess what are the barriers that you're seeing customers run into?
Do you have like 6 hours?
Yeah,
we're gonna.
we have to do the cliff notes. I think today. Keep them wanting something more.
Let's do the short version. So it essentially, if you break out the testing process into a number of stages, right? First of all, you have discovery. The first step is discovery, and that is understanding what is my attack surface overall, right? If I don't know what my attack surface is, there is no way that I will find the vulnerabilities in that attack surface later. And if you're looking at crawling a web app versus discovering an API, that process is completely different. And that's where our partnership with Salt is so strong, because you are able to do an amazing job on the discovery side, and you can feed us the schema for the API, so we don't have to do that discovery by ourselves, or the customer doesn't have to go ahead and create that schema.
And then from a schema standpoint, just interrupt you for a quick second, fact or fiction, developers are great about writing documentation and OAS specifications. I'm just kind of curious from your perspective if you are seeing that get better, because we know it was really bad, but were we trending in the right direction?
Looking across our customers, if 20% of them have the right documentation, I am being very optimistic.
And that's actually pretty good. We've seen some surveys where, Postman just had one from last year where they interviewed or they surveyed thousands and thousands of developers, and only 3% came back and said they trust the documentation that they have.
So 20% is optimistic, but I think it gets even more painful in the next area, and that is authentication.
Yeah.
Right? Because authentication, once you start mapping the attack surface, right, now you're looking at authenticated parts and unauthenticated parts. And even if they do have the schema documented, which, as you said, is way less than 10% in most cases, right, they now start struggling with the JWT token or the right authentication for that API. And API authentication schemas are very different than web authentication schemas. And you need to include those in order to have the right mapping of the target and to be able to run the authenticated scans. The next part is really the tests, right? And testing for API vulnerabilities, there are some overlaps with web app vulnerabilities, but there's a whole different set of vulnerabilities that APIs have that you don't have in web applications. Unless you have the ability to test for those vulnerabilities, you are going to miss those vulnerabilities if you're focused on web applications. The other thing that makes APIs even more fun is now looking at sequencing of APIs and how the flow is between different APIs and what are the business logic attacks that can be generated when you are driving or looking at sequenced APIs and not just one API, and looking at all sorts of fun things like privilege escalation and things like that that you just don't get with web applications, because the set of the things that you can do with APIs is much broader than what you could actually do in the application. And unfortunately, in most cases, developers pay way less attention to the APIs, and that means that there are many loopholes in the APIs that would not exist in the UI, because the UI is right there. You can test it, you can validate it. There are other solutions out there that are trying to be a grab-all, and they're trying to do the discovery, they're trying to do the real-time protection, they're trying to do the scan-in as well, and they're using all sorts of third-party open source tools like a WhatsApp, etc. Unfortunately, those tools fall short in a number of areas because they are good for those companies that say good enough is good enough. Most of our customers do not perceive things that way. If you're a financial institution, if you're a software company, if you're a telco, good enough is not good enough. And having a high rate of false positives, which means that the developers would never adopt your solution. Not having the ability to introduce new multi-step attacks and business logic attacks, etc., is not good enough in your organization. Not having the right authentication schemas or not being able to effectively map the entire sitemap is not good enough. And that is where we're seeing, especially on the API front, many of the generic open source solutions really fall short.
I agree with you. I think I'll call it the buyer beware segment. This whole notion of the inch deep, mile wide technologies. I'm a firm believer of best of breed across the security ecosystem is the only way that you actually minimize your risk. Otherwise, you're just checking boxes and accepting risk. So again, that was one of the really attractive pieces about the relationship between our companies, is the ability to take sort of best of breed API intelligence and being able to feed that into best of breed testing technology to get the depth of testing that you're talking about. Because I agree, a lot of the attacks that we're seeing are multi-step attacks or sequence attacks, to your point, where it's multi-steps across some type of API driven workflow or supply chain. So yeah, that is something a lot of our customers have been asking us for, is the ability, how can I take the intelligence of what you're capturing over here, this best of breed, best in class intelligence, and where can I run that? What's a good technology that has the ability to leverage all of this intelligence and put it to work and do it beyond, that I would say that web level, surface level testing that we were seeing from a lot of other technologies before. I'm sure everybody watching this is going to be pretty psyched about the partnership and what we're able to do with this partnership from the Salt side and the Bright Security side, and what it's actually going to mean from an API risk reduction standpoint. For those interested in Bright Security, where could they go to learn about your technology and get their hands on it?
The best way is to go to our website, www.brightsec, short for security.com, so brightsec.com. You can also find additional information on our LinkedIn page or on our blog, which you can find on our site as well. And if you want, you can follow us on Facebook. And if not, just feel free to email Nick and he'll send you my way.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again, Gadi. I appreciate the time. And thanks everybody for joining today. Becoming an API first company is no longer a nice to have. It's a must have in order to stay competitive in today's world. Successfully embracing API first in your organization is too important not to get right from a security perspective. Thanks for watching, and I invite you to visit salt.security to learn more about our recently announced STEP Partner Program. Also, visit the site to learn how our API Security Intelligence Platform can help you reduce risk today.